Good morning again. Jeremy Martin here at the Institute of the Americas. We are kicking off our week 2, and as you all hopefully know by now, we're doing this a bit differently by running sessions Friday mornings. Instead of putting it across several days, we're doing every Friday morning in May and breaking it up by different topics and ideas and things to talk about. Today, we'll have what we sort of call country focus, and we'll begin with what we're saying is the Biden administration climate and energy vision for the Americas. And to do that, we're going to ask two experts, two United States government officials, to share with us exactly what the emerging after about 100 days of the new administration, what the new vision is. Very pleased, as I already noted, to welcome back to the La Jolla Conference, this time again on the virtual stage, Elizabeth Urbanas, the Acting Assistant Secretary for International Affairs at the U.S. Department of Energy. Beth, good to see you. Thank you as always. Again, this year, I cannot tape an interview with you, so your kids are going to be disappointed once again that I don't do the sidebar interview with you out in the hall. But if anyone really wants to see me interviewing Beth, we have that somewhere on our website for archive. And Anna Shpitsberg, welcome to the La Jolla Conference. Welcome back to the State Department. Congratulations on your appointment as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Energy Transformation at the Bureau of Energy Resources, which is known as ENR in government speak at the U.S. Department of State. Congratulations. Welcome back to government.
Thank you. Nice to be back.
Anna rejoined the State Department after some time with IHS Markit, again, a firm everyone probably knows here today. She was at ENR at the Energy Bureau for several years, and we had the opportunity to work together, particularly on Central America integration, electric integration, and power market. She's a power market expert. So I won't belabor the introductions. These are two folks who I think you all know either personally or by name and by biography. Let's jump right in. We've got 30 minutes and a lot of ground to cover, so let's jump right in. I won't surprise anyone with my first question. It'll be about climate. It'll be about the Leaders Summit. This administration, from pretty much the minute after the victory in the election was confirmed, has talked about climate and put the emphasis on climate. So let's begin with a quick recap on the Leaders Summit at the end of April on Earth Day. And with regards to the United States and engagement in Latin America, obviously this is a Latin American audience here. And what are the key takeaways? And I'll go to you first, Anna, given that State was the lead on this, and then Beth can sort of fill in the blanks, but or fill in as it were. So Anna, help us recap and set the stage, and then we'll move from there, please. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for welcoming me in such good company. In terms of the Leaders Summit on Climate, it was a big milestone for us as we think about moving toward COP26 in Glasgow. I think it's very clear that the cost of climate change is too high, and so in order for us to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, we need to straighten our paths. So the steps that countries take right now and this year really make the difference, and we really don't feel that there's a buffer. Now, as the Western Hemisphere contributes about 20% of global greenhouse gas emissions, action in our region is essential to achieving those goals. And that's why at the summit, the United States and other countries announced their plans for enhanced climate ambition. So a lot of the key takeaways were those big announcements. President Biden announced a new target for the United States to achieve a 50 to 52% reduction from 2005 levels in economy-wide net greenhouse gas emissions in 2030. And other leaders did as well. We saw Prime Minister Trudeau announce Canada's updated target to reduce emissions by 40 to 45% from 2005 levels, a significant increase from their prior target. Argentine President Fernandez pledged to enhance Argentina's NDC by limiting emissions to a level 27.7% below its 2016 target. They increased their renewable energy targets. They committed to reduce methane emissions. They pledged to eradicate illegal deforestation. Brazil pledged to reach net zero emissions by 2050. That brought forward its previously announced goal by 10 years. They also pledged to double funding for enforcement to combat deforestation and to end illegal deforestation by 2030. Incredibly important in the Amazon. Jamaica and Antigua and Barbuda, they highlighted their commitments to reducing emissions. And I think it was really important to have them there to stress the adverse effects that climate change already has on small island states in the Caribbean. And we had other countries affirm their commitments to increasing renewable energy generation, reaching net zero targets by 2050, utilizing nature-based solutions to fight climate change. So I think we really saw the region take a few steps forward at the summit, and now we're all focused on implementation.
Thank you. That's a great summary. And I mean, there's obviously some things to talk about. I think folks here probably want to know a little bit more about some of the specific countries So maybe we'll come to some of the specific countries, but let's stick with this general topic at first. Beth, I heard Anna use the word implementation. I know that you've been very much involved in some of the bilateral agreements, maybe not so much on the climate side, but anyway, share your thoughts from the DOE side of the perspective here on this same question. Oh, you're muted, Beth, sorry. Thank you.
I do want to start with the fact that as a person who's been in government for 21 years, going back to the Clinton administration, the Biden administration is moving forward in a very strong way and a very aggressive way that is appropriate to the challenges we're facing here with climate. I've been very impressed with the coordination of all the agencies. So happy to be working with Anna and ENR, but also working with our colleagues and Secretary Kerry's new organization, SPEC, also working with the usual suspects, USAID, Commerce Department, and our various Exim Bank and TDA, and also DFC. And I have to say, we are extremely knitted up well together, and the White House is making sure that we all know what each other's is doing and that the priorities are clear. And so as we move to implementation, which is where DOE plays probably the biggest role, I feel very confident that the Western Hemisphere is going to benefit from the full force of all the tools that we have in the United States government, including the kind of work that we do at DOE, but also all of the other work. There is a strong focus on syncing things up from an energy perspective, but also from a climate perspective, so that we're looking at the issue from a fully integrated approach. And so DOE has gotten back into the business, quite frankly, not only of clean energy, we've always been doing that in the hemisphere, including the past 4 years, but also looking at integrating other issues like adaptation, deforestation, and things like that into what we do, and as we work together with other parts of the government. Obviously, we are right now going through processes within the government where we're looking at target countries and target regions. I think another thing that you're going to see a little, that might be a little different with this administration, and it speaks to Anna's past experience in particular, when she was in ENR and in government, is a focus on regional approaches. And I think you'll see us start with a pretty aggressive approach on Central America and the Northern Triangle, and that has specific issues and consequences for the United States right now. But I also think we see a lot of opportunity in the Southern Cone and other parts of South America as well. And of course, we at the Department of Energy deal with a full integration scenario with Mexico and Canada in all sources. And so I think we want to see that cooperation deepen and increase as well. And so I think you will see, those are some of the changes you'll see. I think you'll see fuller approaches to the projects that we do, and that we want to work with other companies, other financial sources, multilateral institutions, multilateral development banks. And I think it will hopefully be it'll be a very powerful way forward on these issues.
It's a perfect segue to what I wanted to get into next, and exactly what people always want to hear when they say, okay, the U.S. government's vision for the Americas. How much money will the United States government put on the table to support climate action, increased deployment of renewables? So let's get into that, because I think, Beth, you rightly highlighted sort of a very interesting, the area of focusing on regional, but also this fuller approach. So let's take that specific piece of the fuller approach, the development finance, the USAID's Development Finance Corporation, TDA. Just quickly sticking with you, Beth, since I know that DOE has, a whole different, sort of toolkit of ways of helping, and then Anna, of course, at state. But share some thoughts on that. How do you help finance green recovery? How can we help finance Latin America's path to recovery and make it green, build back better, and all the things we keep hearing about?
That's great, because DOE has a very specific role in this, and it's not actually related to finance, but it's more related, and Anna could probably talk a little bit more about that, because it's definitely more State Department, because they actually have funding for foreign assistance. Our department, it gets domestic funding largely. We can finance some things or help finance some international work, but what we bring and what State Department and USAID spend money on through our laboratories and through our programs in DOE is providing that technical assistance that includes the toolkits for countries to assess what makes sense and what doesn't, for countries to assess whether to interconnect or not, to actually go and start modeling out the specific impacts of certain decisions, particularly as they pertain to greenhouse gas emissions or energy access or whatever you want, water nexus issues, water utilization and scarcity. And of course, the department works across the full scope of energy sources, which also I think is a huge benefit to the hemisphere, because like the rest of the hemisphere, we in the United States and in the Department of Energy here are looking at all technologies and all sources across the board to try to make energy cleaner, more accessible, more affordable, and less impactful in terms of climate change. And our laboratories don't just work on energy, they also work in transportation in terms of fuel sources and technologies for electric vehicles and those sorts of things. We have a very advanced program on hydrogen, and that is something that I think Latin America is ripe for, and Chile is already making some steps forward with donors from other countries like Germany. And that is a space where we could also be helpful and a little more aggressive for the region, because there's great potential in all those areas. And I think the other area that we'll also be focusing on will be methane abatement, because like the rest of the hemisphere, we are a major oil and gas producer, and the Biden administration is committed to bending down that curve on emissions, and also creating good jobs for the people that may be phased out as a result of choices in the energy sector. And so that's also an experience that I think we can share, and that DOE has a very big mandate on.
Man, you are telegraphing where I'm going, but let's go back to Anna here. Thank you, Beth. And I think, it'd be interesting. So new financing mechanisms, new loan programs, obviously Beth just walked through, some of DOE, but what is state, what is ENR, what are some of the other things that are being done in that regard, Anna?
Yeah, absolutely. So we want to make up for lost time. So I think, which is why at the summit there was an announcement to double our annual public climate finance contribution to developing economies by 2024. I think that equates to about 5.7 billion. As part of this goal, the U.S. also intended to triple its adaptation finance by 2024, and the Biden administration will work obviously closely with Congress to meet these goals. But we saw, as part of that, announcements from the International Development Finance Corporation to achieve a net zero investment portfolio by 2040. That's actually a big deal. It's the earliest target of any G7 or G20 development finance institution. We saw the Millennium Challenge Corporation say that over the next 5 years, they're going to commit more than 50% of its program funding to climate-related investments. And I absolutely second what Beth has said. The amount of coordination on these issues has been incredible. All agencies are engaged in climate finance, and we're also thoughtfully thinking through how it can enable economic growth in this critical time. We know those two things need to go together, the climate and decarbonization, but also the growth component and employment. We know how important that is. Yeah. And the technical assistance that supports that growth, including all of the work that the laboratories at DOE have been doing. The Department of State on its side had announced scaled up technical assistance to countries participating in the Renewable Energy for Latin America and Caribbean Initiative, which is better known as RELAC. So that's the regional effort that's led by Colombia, Chile, and Costa Rica to collectively increase renewable energy capacity to at least 70% by 2030. We saw expanded support for low emission development strategies, global partnership. So there's a full effort to enhance support and to use all the tools in the government and to really do this in as coordinated a manner as possible.
So I making up for lost time, that's an interesting, but let me ask this very specific follow-up. I heard you say 1.7 billion that was announced at the summit in April. That's clearly a global figure. Any idea for Latin America or Western Hemisphere, how much we're talking about in that area?
There isn't a split per area. So it's 5.7 as the annual target by 2024. Okay, I'm saying it's about, because it's essentially looking to double the commitment during Obama's term. Yeah.
Okay. And then obviously, in terms of development finance, those kinds of things will be focusing on the areas and the priorities that, the climate action, the renewable deployment. And so all of the sort of development finance that's already budgeted will be, going that way. So really quickly, because I think Beth also talked about something that I didn't intend to bring up, but I will, and maybe she can take it as a former Treasury official, and that's the role of the IDB. At one point, there was some chatter about, further capitalization, increased funding into the IDB, indeed, to help, with the recovery and sort of the building back. So, Anna, not to put you on the spot, maybe Beth, you want to take that? You're welcome to, Anna, but Beth, maybe why don't you go ahead first, and then Anna can chime in as well.
Yeah, so my understanding, and I don't have all the details from folks at Treasury, is that they are looking at, they went through a round of capital increases as a result of COVID, particularly at the World Bank. And some other institutions. So, and I think that's the same with IDB. But I think obviously a key element to the work that will be necessary to bring the economies back in a lot of these countries and a lot of Latin American countries is gonna be around the energy sector. DOE has an MOU with the IDB in particular, and we do a lot of work with them. And CARICOM and a few other regional entities, looking at opportunities to work together to bring our technical, scientific research and development, modeling toolkit expertise to the table with IDB that is a convener and also could be a financer, or also works with the private sector and the financial community. And so I think we really want to leverage those tools in the region as much as possible.
Weigh in at all?
Well said.
Okay. Fantastic. No, and sort of following that, I think, so, the region is, obviously, I don't want to talk too much about COVID, but it's all very obvious what's happened in terms of the economic downturn, the need to foment a recovery. So the question I want to put on the table is indeed, with all of this attention and the urgency and the climate imperative, how do you all, both in terms of DOE, but especially State Department being the foreign policy, arm of the government, how do you work with governments in the region that are large fossil fuel producers who have, historic legacy dependencies on fiscally on fossil fuel production, and see that as a way to restart their economies, especially as we've seen the recovery in the price of oil and gas? So summarizing my point here, how can the United States government, with all of the rhetoric and all of the things we've talked about so far on climate action, nevertheless help governments and countries of the region strike the balance in terms of this recovery, green recovery, while they absolutely need the resource from the fossil fuel? So Anna, as the foreign policy arm of the United States government, let's have you start, and Beth's smiling, she'll wait to hear what you say, and then she can weigh in as well. Go ahead, Anna.
It's true. There will be dislocation in traditional energy markets, and it's going to be felt by countries that rely on fossil fuel exports for GDP and a significant portion of their GDP. But this won't happen in a day. And there will be opportunity that's part of the green transition. And that's what we want to focus in, making sure that countries are investing in the systems of tomorrow to ensure that they leverage existing assets and resources. And one example is energy minerals, for example. So the increase in renewable energy and electric vehicle technologies that's expected to come over the next decade and 2 decades is incredible. It will result in unprecedented demand. I have seen some estimates of over 500% for some minerals in terms of the demand needed to meet the expected growth. So a lot of those minerals and metals that are necessary are located in this hemisphere. And we've been working with countries through the Energy Resource Governance Initiative in the region to establish an attractive climate for investment and to ensure sustainable mining practices. So, but kind of to go back overall, just like traditional energy companies are reevaluating and diversifying their investments to address the shift, we hope that countries are doing this as well. We want them to benefit from the opportunities rather than chasing them later. And I think this was highlighted in 2020 because when we looked at low carbon investments, they remained stable. So amid the economic downturn, and that included low carbon investments in oil and gas company portfolios. So this is something that is important to take advantage of. In the US, we have some of our fastest growing jobs are in wind and solar. And that's not surprising. We had over a 60% increase in renewable capacity last year relative to 19. So this is something to benefit from, and we want to work with countries to make sure that they are not too slow to transition in order to take advantage of it for their economies.
add to that? Thank you, Anna.
So on the technical side, I think we envision at DOE ramping up our work on carbon capture, utilization, and storage, which there's enormous opportunities, particularly in the oil sector and gas sector in a lot of these countries, okay, that are currently either flaring or looking at other releases. So there's a huge amount of work we could help with there. And then also with just methane capture and abatement. I mean, we have a laboratory, Nettle. It's got 2 campuses. One is in Pittsburgh and one is in West Virginia. And they focus solely on not only CCUS, but looking at how we can better produce, transport, and more efficiently capture and utilize natural gas as it's produced and as it goes through the supply chain. And so there's a lot of opportunities there too, including blue hydrogen. And so these are all areas where I think also, and to Anna's last 2 points, which are really powerful, they actually give enormous economic opportunity to these countries as they're coming out of the COVID period.
Yeah, I think that's obviously the economic, the jobs question in the recovery is going to be enormous. So I appreciate, and I think I've gotten some questions here. I'll encourage people, please post the questions in the Q&A function instead of the main chat, so I can see those a little bit easier. Let's actually, I think we've talked a little bit about some areas that I think are very unique by country or can be unique by country. So if you don't mind, maybe we'll pivot. I've got some questions I want to follow up on some of these countries. And let's just go right to Argentina first because of some of the things that you both have just said. I think, and not to put Argentina on the spot or you all on the spot about Argentina, but Vaca Muerta, the role of gas, the role of shale, it's been an area of important collaboration between the United States and Argentina. It's been an enormous, obviously, area for economic development in Neuquén, but also Argentina writ large. What's going to happen with the new administration? Beth, maybe why don't you go first in terms of, I know there've been some, to your point about methane, the role of methane, flaring, those kinds of issues. Talk about Argentina, Vaca Muerta, and where you see it fitting right now.
Yeah, well, I wish the economic situation were a little bit better to start off, because that always impacts cost of capital. And the situation right now with the IMF and the Paris Club is not looking good. So we have a lot of general concerns. I mean, I am an old Treasury person, but we do worry about, and we saw these same impediments, quite frankly, in the Macri administration, that cost of capital is high and it's hard to attract increased investment, even in a known fantastic place to get gas out of the ground. So I think we're hoping that we end up in a good spot economically with Argentina. But I think some of the technologies we talked about, CCUS, in Vaca Muerta is also a major oil producing area. And so, trying to utilize those resources better. Again, looking at trying to contain emissions, methane and otherwise from the fields. Those are all areas that we not only can go in and help the Argentinians live up to these new targets that they've agreed to, the enhanced targets that they were talking about when they were here a few weeks ago, and we were all very busy. But also help them economically, because capturing methane is a net benefit, and everybody wants cleaner energy at the end of the day. The customers and the ratepayers, that's what they're looking for. And so I think there's a lot we can do with Argentina, and there's a ton we can do with Argentina in renewable energy. I mean, just enormous amounts. They have huge potential. I mean, I know that some of our labs looked at various kinds of potential in solar and wind, and Argentina has enormous potential. But again, the incentives need to be right. Good financing needs to be available, and those are all things we would really look to work with Argentina on.
Thank you, Anna. Why don't you? Thanks, Beth. Why don't you take exactly that? Let's focus away from Vaca Muerta and have you talk about maybe the clean energy renewable, what you see there.
I think there's significant opportunity in that space. We had worked with Argentina on their renewable energy auctions, and there was incredible interest, and there was a lot of potential. They worked on retail regulation, on distributed generation, and I second the capital cost and the financing situation right now is a bit difficult. And I think focusing on renewable energy, not just to bring on renewable energy for the grid, but also directly to commercial and industrial customers is important. So in thinking about the Vaca Muerta, or a lot of oil and gas operations are trying to green as well. And so they're trying to bring in renewable energy for their operations. And in cases where it is hard for the government to finance and the credit rating is just suffering, having those big companies be able to directly procure renewables is an opportunity. So I think it's still, it's an open space. It's a difficult one in the moment, but the amount of opportunity is incredible. And I think the government is interested in all of this as well. And I completely agree also in focusing on also cleaning up emissions where we can and decarbonizing development processes where we can, because that's the ultimate goal.
Excellent. It's amazing how quickly time goes through these conversations. There's a lot of discussion, a lot of commentary on the board about hydrogen. We had a whole panel last week with 5 leaders from different countries on hydrogen. Let me, Anna, stick with you here, just wide open. I won't go country specific, but we do know what Chile's doing. We do know what Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay. So hydrogen comments, where does that see emerging? Is it a bilateral or regional? That's, idea of the regional focus. Any thoughts on that?
We're incredibly excited for hydrogen. I don't think we can achieve our goals without hydrogen being in play. And so when we're thinking about working with countries and collaborating with them on transport electrification, on industry decarbonization, so not just power sector. I know I spend most of my time in power sector, but really trying to look beyond it at industry and transport, and even where there are applications to increase flexibility in the power system. Hydrogen is just so critical. And I think the amount of funding and attention from the private community that has been going in, that I've seen going in for the past few years, is incredible. So I think the goal is to put as much energy as possible as working with the region. And of course, with countries like Chile that have announced such ambitious goals and have a full strategy, there's incredible opportunity, especially where we are looking already at green hydrogen and the solar resources in the Atacama region and how to utilize that appropriately. So it's something that's of great potential. And I don't want to take up too much time because I'm sure Beth, with all the work at the labs, wants to say something as well.
Well, yeah, thank you, Anna. And Beth, and let me throw in this, since we're rolling through this, you've worked a lot on Brazil, US. So comment a little bit, if you would, on the hydrogen question. And then I'm interested in your thoughts on where we stand with Brazil vis-a-vis, US, Brazil.
Yeah, great, thanks. So I don't have a lot to add from what Anna said, other than I'd like to see a regional market in hydrogen develop. I'd like to see a number of regional markets develop. I also cover Asia, and that's something I think we're going to be looking at with the Quad. So the Quad countries, which we can talk about later, but or in another conference that you don't host. But But in terms of Brazil, I think we are already in the process of looking at reorienting our partnership there along the lines that we've talked about. And I'll be frank with you, the Brazilians have always wanted to have significant conversations, and we have historically had a lot of work with them on energy efficiency and renewable energy. But we are looking at significantly opening up the cooperation that we share, that is interagency cooperation. With Brazil, to focus more on renewable energy, renewable integration, hydrogen, and other aspects as well. There's so much potential in Brazil. It's the second largest economy in the Americas, and they have a great manufacturing base. And so civil nuclear is another area that I think we will continue to work very strongly with Brazil on. I see actually our cooperation with Brazil expanding as we move forward with this administration.
Fantastic. No, I think that's a fantastic message. Okay, Anna, do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And okay. Also on our side, I had spoken to minerals. That's another area where there's opportunity. Brazil has the second largest proven reserves of rare earth elements, as well as substantial reserves of minerals essential for those clean technologies. We keep speaking about cobalt, copper, graphite, lithium, nickel. So there's incredible opportunities. So we're cooperating with the Ministry of Mines and Energy and the Geologic Survey of Brazil to increase mining sector governance capacity, and we're co-leading the U.S.-Brazil Critical Minerals Working Group. So in addition to all of the opportunities that Beth mentioned, there's so many more, and we're really excited to continue collaborating.
Unfortunately, the critical minerals could be another 30-minute session. I will invite people to check out the deep dive interviews we've been doing with folks about the critical minerals, the sort of geopolitical elements of it, and then also lithium specific. We had someone from Benchmark Minerals talking about that. I've got to wrap up, but I can't go and can't let you all go without talking about Mexico. I saved that for the end here because it's, I was hoping people would be listening, and then what he just said, Mexico. But joking aside, this is a very, very important topic. And in every day, there's no more news. Suffice to say, it's very complicated. So I want to be careful here. But I want to understand from you both where you see areas of cooperation. We're going to have a panel next week where we try and focus on areas of cooperation as opposed to just, rehashing complaints. But with that said, under USMCA, there are continually emerging serious concerns, serious questions over the way the Mexican government is managing the energy sector. So all of that's a wind up to have you both share some thoughts. Does the government seem to want to cooperate on climate and energy goals? The Mexican government, I should say. And I think as we head to Glasgow, it's important. And what do you expect, and how do you see engagement? Just as much as you were very clear and full-throated in where you see Brazil, U.S. I ask you the same on Mexico. Anna, first, we'll go to you first as the foreign policy.
We have the same concerns. We've heard from several U.S. energy companies and investors that are adversely affected by recent regulation changes. So we're continuing to engage the government on energy and regulatory matters. And they're a critical partner for energy trade in the region. In terms of cooperation, there's plenty of opportunity to advance climate goals. We see potential in distributed generation, standards for battery systems, e-mobility, and joint work with other regions. But we really hope there's improvement in the investment climate so that we can collaborate in this area and that Mexico can take advantage of all these opportunities.
Okay. Beth, any thoughts on that? Anything regarding, well, yeah. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, look, for us, Mexico's essential. Okay, we have so many pipelines, we have wires that connect us to Mexico. So making sure that our systems, and I think that was highlighted with some of the weather events in Texas this past year, and has been highlighted with events that have occurred in Mexico as well in the past. So it's super important that we are looking at continuing to make sure that we have stable systems cross-border, and that goes in both pipes and wires. So we will continue to work with them and to try to push the agenda on improving those issues, including cybersecurity, which in the United States, as we've seen this past week, it's been Colonial Pipeline all day, every day. But those are the sorts of things that I think we have opportunity to focus with on them, and it's a no-brainer. It benefits both sides. Just a couple other areas. We used to have a very strong energy efficiency standards program with Mexico, and I think this could be an area where we could work together. It helps, again, both of our countries because we export products and various white goods and other things to one another, and the more we are standardized in terms of our efficiency standards, it benefits both countries under USMCA and economically. And then just some other areas that we are looking at. We are looking at Mexico, and AMLO has a very strong focus on the southern part of the country and on improving the lives of the people who live there. And one of the issues there in some more isolated communities is energy access. And so I think we're looking at trying to pursue more work in that area with the Mexicans. We've also consistently been engaged with them on workforce development in the energy sector, and which is an issue that actually is cross-border. When our companies go down there, when Mexican companies come up here, it is a great benefit to have workers that can do the welding and that can do the work that is needed and string the lines. So I think we'll continue in that area. And my favorite area, which is women in energy. So we will be working with the Mexicans there on enhancing engagement of women in the energy sector in Mexico and enhancing the engagement of women in the energy sector in the United States too.
Absolutely, and I am so pleased to have both of our speakers on this panel be indeed high-level women in energy, not just women in energy, but extremely. Come on, no, you all are representative of the United States government's excellence in terms of the goal towards gender equality. But it is absolutely essential, this topic, and I think women in energy is something that we are all very mindful of, and try to make sure to have in our panels as many female executives and officials as possible. So thanks for underscoring that important point, Beth. Unfortunately, we have to leave it there. I know there's a whole bunch of questions. I've just not been able to get to them. Time always runs away from me. I'm going to get all of these questions, and Anna and Beth, your staff have been so amazing in helping me get you all online here. And now I hope they'll be so amazing in helping me answer or get answers to these questions that our audience has posed that I've not been able to ask you. So we'll talk to Dan Burns and Lauren Joyce, and thanks to both of them and a host of other folks there at both your offices in supporting and preparing you all for this. As always, we have so much more to talk about. There's no doubt we want to keep our eye on Mexico and the USMCA. I think there's a lot of us, and most of us here on this conference are concerned, and so we'll stay tuned and see what the U.S. government ultimately decides to do there. But a round of virtual applause. Thank you all so much. Beth Urbanas from the United States Department of Energy, Anna Shpitsberg from the United States Department of State. Thank you all. Have a wonderful afternoon. I really appreciate your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Have a good one.